There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads, recorded on Thursday afternoon. I am in a little bit of a tizzy because my expensive video editing software has stopped working, so that I've got 3/4 of the way through editing my mystery guest chat, which you're about to see, and it just kind of stopped working. So I think I'm going to have to redo it all those edits, in another much less helpful but perhaps more reliable software on my iPad, and then edit this one on the iPad, which is probably going to mean I'm not going to have this ready to go to launch by Friday morning, but I'll sort that all out, and it won't be the end of the world if you have to wait. All three of you that watch for when is Sean's Friday Reads going to be posted, if you have to wait a bit for this, but beyond my control. Other than that, I'm in a super great mood. I've had another great reading week, and personally don't have any news. Kenji's good, no news there. Everything's going along swimmingly, and I'm mostly reading all day long. It's just lovely. So, with that being said, in whatever final edited version I managed to present it to you in, let's go meet this week's really fascinating mystery guest. And this week's mystery guest is the Canadian writer Anne Kavlovic, joining us from Outaouais in Quebec, here to talk about her debut novel, coming out October 1st, so you'll be seeing this just a couple days after it gets launched, Count on Me. Anne, welcome.
Thank you so much.
So I don't know anything about that part of Quebec. I don't really know a whole lot about Quebec, so can you tell us a little bit about where you're situated?
So it's just north of the Ottawa River, so the other side of Ottawa. So
Okay.
Functionally, I mean, I work in Ottawa. It's very close to Ottawa.
You have had a whole bunch of stuff, fiction and creative nonfiction, published here, there, and everywhere, including the Globe and Mail. Your website will be linked in the show notes, so I encourage people to go and see all the links to various things you've had published all over the place. And now here comes your first novel, Count on Me. What a fascinating premise. Tell us, please, about Count on Me.
It's a novel about love and money colliding in a family with aging parents. Tia is a protagonist, a single mother. Her parents are aging, go to nursing homes, and there's a kind of a sibling rivalry story in there. A sibling sort of slowly kind of takes over parents' control of their health decisions and their assets. And Tia has to sort of work her way through that while trying to sort of, there's a intergenerational trauma there, and a cycle breaking story too about, she's going to opposite extremes with her own child, and so she has her own journey of finding a better balance about that. So it's about elder abuse in a complex family dynamic, but hopefully despite the heavy topic, hopefully ultimately an uplifting read in the end.
I just feel like you're so brave to tackle this topic. I just cringed when I saw the back, and I cringed meaning, oh, this sounds incredible and painful and really uncomfortable story about people that we love, and the way that money can just screw up family and inheritance and aging parent. All that stuff is just fraught. I don't know of another novel that tackles this head on. Did you feel like you were writing into a void, or within some tradition I'm not aware of?
So that was the thing that was striking, right? And applied for a grant to write the first draft, and so I had to sort of explicitly research other novels that deal with this, and it's a striking void of literature that even talks about aging at all, really, let alone specifically elder abuse. And the examples that are out there, it's literally like the butler, the nurse, like there's all these tropes about someone outside of the family, right? But it is, unfortunately, shockingly common to have at least some kind of like difficulty in that area, right? Like we don't want to talk about aging. We don't want to talk about death. We don't wake up in the morning and say, oh, today's the good day to get my will and power of attorney in order. But anyone listening to this, if you take anything from this conversation, if you don't have that stuff in order, please call a lawyer and get it in order. It's a kindness to everyone involved, right? So it's a really common experience, yet we don't talk about it very much. So you don't want it. It is hard.
So this is a big question, and I don't mean it to be overly personal, so please answer however you want. But what is it in you, about you, that this is the novel that you're bringing forth into the world?
Yeah, so a mix of things. When I was in grad school, I was my friends joke that oh, Anne wants to write like a theory about love and money, or love and economics, or love and money. I started writing later in life, I guess, in my mid 20s, and I knew I wanted to write a story, but I discerned I was not kind of ready or mature enough for it. And then when my parents did go through nursing homes. This is a work of fiction, but you see a lot in nursing homes, and people like to throw the staff in the bus. I do not. The staff overall are amazing, but family dramas will play out in front of you in the hallways, right? Looking at my personal experience, but also what I saw, and then what I ended up researching, realized like, oh, this is it. Like, this is where tiny little fissures about, who got what or who got more attention or whatever can really explode. A lot, and again, don't mean to be a downer, but there are a lot of good families that like that really break apart at that time, right? It's a acutely emotional time, and things that haven't been maybe dealt with kind of can bubble up. The good news in it is, if you are aware of this, there's a lot that can be done to prevent it. But it really struck me like, okay, this is one manifestation of love and money. I think I will write others. I'm still curious about what's the difference between what's transaction versus what other, if we say a human relationship is transactional, that's not a compliment. But there's give and take in any relationship. So the boundaries between all that, I remain curious about.
Oh my God, it just sounds incredible. So tell us more about Tia and Tristan. That's the siblings at the heart of the story.
Yeah, so Tia is a single mom. She's an accountant. Think of her as a very delightful geek. She's trying to do the right thing. Her sibling, her brother Tristan, as is an older brother, was probably, thrust into roles, caretaking roles himself a little bit too early on. He also is partnered with someone who is probably driving the bus a little bit. So when I was writing this, I had an ethical dilemma, because people were encouraging me to sort of get more into the minds of the people conducting the financial and emotional abuse. And then I quickly realized I don't want to write instruction manual for elder abuse. There's Tristan and Tristan's partner, Gloria. She's a little bit of a black box, but for a reason. You see the end results of the emotional manipulation, but I didn't want to write too much of it. Like, I wanted that to happen off stage. So, yeah, I've learned too much about how to insinuate myself gradually into a senior's life. I'm saying that out loud, so no one no intention of using that for anything other than fiction. But so, your siblings who circumstances have sort of pulled them apart. They were close, and then sort of slight fissures, like I said before, pull it apart. There's often, from my research, when one sibling's had a bit of a harder time than the other. Tristan has had a bit of a harder time keeping down a job. They can have different senses of entitlement to what's fair then from the parents' assets, and on and on it goes.
We start at a certain point, and then the events of the novel come over weeks, months, years?
I think it's about, I'd have to check my timeline for my plotting, but I think it's about 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, because things sort of start slowly, right? And it can be hard to tell sometimes if something is actually a red flag or not, right? So I've built that in a little bit slowly into the novel.
I am feeling anxious about reading this book in a really good way. Like,
Okay.
so my question, I'm going to hope that the answer is yes, but I still have to ask it the way it's going to sound funny,
Good.
the tone of voice. Is this novel going to break my heart? I hope it.
Um, so I hope not. It's candlelit. It wouldn't be candlelit if it didn't have some dark bits to it. I'm just joking, mostly. I think the redemption comes in the relationship between Tia, the protagonist, and her daughter,
Right.
and how that cycle is broken. Life is hard as it is, and I think we turn to novels and fiction for something ultimately distilled and uplifting. So, yeah, it's a hard subject matter, and go there. I was conscious about peppering in lightness and connection and positivity in there too. And ultimately, without giving away the ending, I think that kind of the hope does come in kind of in the cycle breaking sort of story and sweetness in that dynamic between Tia and her daughter.
How old is the daughter when the story opens?
Oh, a baby.
She's a baby. Okay.
Just, yeah, little baby. Sandwich generation kind of a story, yeah.
It says here that it's full of humor, and I can tell already you're a humorous person. So, how do you get humor like that into such a intense family story? I mean, I guess it's almost a stupid question, isn't it? But I'll just let it.
No, it's not. I mean, I was mindful of this with writing it, right? So Tia's very quirky. I think you were smarter than me. There's a lot of little anecdotes about other things that she's reading, etc., that are woven in. I think humor is kind of one of the healthiest coping strategies for dealing with difficult things, right? And one of my favorite authors, and she does this. I only aspire to do a fraction of what Miriam Taves does, but Miriam Taves manages to write books about her sibling suicide. And
Oh,
it's also brutally funny, but it's like it's a
yes.
combination of heart and funny, and that's my favorite. And if I achieved like 5% of Miriam Tave's level of doing that, I'd be happy. So that
What
gives
a
you a
model.
flavor.
What a model. All my puny sorrows is
Yes.
just, oh,
Oh, at the
absolutely.
funeral scene, I mean, oh,
So the title is very interesting. Count on me. Is it ironic? I would say no, because it makes sense in terms of the mother-daughter relationship with the next generation.
yeah, the title came to me in a dream, which sounds very flaky, but it really did. But I think the subconscious is smarter than maybe the neocortex part. Tia is an accountant, so the subplot deals with audits that were done of environmental charities back in the early 2000s. So there's a bit of a parallel between sort of family toxic dynamics and kind of environmental toxicity, if you will. She's counting, and she's an accountant for a reason, right? She grew up in a very transactional kind of a family, and so she manages the puts and takes, trying to keep things more transparent, maybe. And then, of course, just the expected things of count on me in the emotional sense. And there's a lot in here about attachment in family attachments and how to repair those, and the struggle to parent better than you were necessarily parented without going to yet another, just a different extreme.
As we've been talking, I've been thinking about why is this making me feel, anxious in a really positive way. Like, oh, I really want to read this, and I think it's going to make me uncomfortable. And it's because we're going through the winding up of an estate of my dad's, and none of those things have come up. But I realize that it's just natural that at that emotionally intense time, everybody's worried that that might come up. So I think that's why it's hitting me. It's such a worry in families at those times of transition, death, dividing up an estate, selling property, and so on. So I think it's
It's,
going to really resonate for me.
and,
But
and tell me honestly when you do read it, because my hope is that if you're not going through the worst manifestations of it, you can have a gratitude that that's not what's happening, right?
absolutely,
And
that's
then also, my sincere hope is that people reading this would then be more prepared to face things or to nip things in the bud that could be going south.
that's
You
right.
know,
That's
I think people should get their advice about aging from lawyers, not from writers. But I do think that like denial about this or not facing it is not the path of least resistance, right? I know seniors are like, well, I'll haunt you from the afterlife if you siblings fight after I'm gone. Not necessarily the most effective strategy, right? Like being aware of it, having those difficult conversations, making sure paperwork is in order, making sure there's no misunderstandings can go a long way, and that's an ultimately hopeful message.
and what are you working on now?
I had to take a little bit of a break after this was a very big baby to birth, and so I'm still a little postpartum. So I've been writing sort of shorter essays and other things. And again, I will kind of tackle some more love and money things, but I'm noodling around for what that's going to look like. But
Very
I'm not ready to do another novel yet. I still need some blood transfusions before I even think about that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What books do you have to recommend?
I think what people read is so personal to where the kind of person you are and where you are in life, right? There's been stories I've read that, at one phase of life that went, didn't mean anything, and then I reread them 10 years later and they really hit me, right? So into the internet void than anything other than what I've recently read. But so there's another local author in Ottawa, Wayne Ng. He has a couple mystery books out, but he wrote another one that was a really interesting take on intergenerational trauma and cycle breaking. It's called The Family Code. Also, another rough single mother kind of story, involving children dating society and such. Like, has all the ingredients of being a really harsh read, and there's some realities in there, but it is also I found it ultimately uplifting about the human capacity to grow. And then I saw Madeleine Thien speak recently, and so I picked up not her latest one, but I think it's her debut called Certainty.
Yeah.
But I'll read anything she writes. She's an extraordinary combination of heart and mind. That's sort of my favorites. So those are my two recents.
So her penultimate novel, Do Not Say We Have Nothing, is my favorite novel of all time.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
And you've read, that's saying something, because you've read everything.
It's a Marmite book. Lots of people around me can't understand why I love it so much,
Yeah.
but I loved it with all my heart, and I resisted reading it because at that time, when I read it about 6 or 7 years ago, I thought, I'm not sure that I'm interested in Chinese history and
Right.
classical music composers, and I'm not really sure. And that novel put me through the ringers of all of the nuances of all of those stories and those characters, and it made me deeply interested in all this stuff I
Yeah.
didn't think I would be interested in. I think I read it over about 4 months. I was living in Tokyo at that time, and she did an event at the Canadian Embassy in Tokyo, and I had a moment with her. It was lovely.
I often think, when I read jacket blurbs, like often, I think it was something by, what's her name now? East Coast author. She wrote February. But like I looked at the cover.
Lisa Moore.
Lisa Moore, yeah. And I looked at and I was like, I don't want to read about like an oil rig thing exploding. But then I loved the book, right? And I find it, even as a reader, very hard to discern from jacket blurbs whether or not I'm going to, like, you can almost write about anything. It's how you do it. But I wonder do you find you can pick out better from a blurb what you're going to really resonate with generally, or is that a
Well,
surprise for you?
you should have been asking all the questions because that's a really good question, specifically for me, because I usually don't read them at all.
Oh, really?
I don't want to know what's on the back cover.
Ah.
No, so I typically avoid them, and I find them so unsatisfying once and I think the adjectives they use are so gross. Just like it's propaganda. It's stupid stuff. Not that the people who write it are bad people, but it's just nonsense.
That's so
So,
interesting.
so yours, I read the first few sentences and it's lovely. It's well done. So I don't want to, I'm not talking about your book, but just enough but I don't really like to. So when I do that, I kind of go like this. I just want to get a couple sentences from it so I know what the
Yeah.
book's about, but I don't really want to. Plus, when I read this book, I will have forgotten whatever I read about it. So it'll all be new to me
But
again. But I tell people, don't read the back. Why would you do that? Just go to page 1. Oh, so now I have to ask, did you write the blurb on the back?
yeah, I did. So I'm glad you like it.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad that I made an exception of that one. And it was a delight to talk to you about this book that made me uncomfortable in the most interesting way that it's just going to make me want to get to the book sooner rather than later. And I hope you'll come back so we can talk about it more once I have.
I'd love to come back, and I hope it's a productive and quickly dissipated discomfort that turns into other positive emotions as well. Because life gives us enough natural discomfort, we turn to fiction for hopefully something a little more distilled.
Well, sure. I like hard-won redemption stories.
Okay.
The characters have to be put through their paces and then to arrive at a state of grace or insight or whatever, but don't make it facile. And it sounds like that isn't going to be going on here. It's hard won indeed.
Thank you so much, Sean. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
You could see in that interview that I was almost triggered. Like, not triggered, but It struck so close to home, as I tried to explain, kind of fumblingly, to Anne, closing out the farm and stuff. There was always a potential that who knows what, what kind of family stuff might emerge, and we got through it, I would say, virtually unscathed, but this topic was very close to the bone for me when we recorded that chat, so the novel sounds fascinating. I can't wait to read it. I have been busy with booktube editing. Is that why my software froze up? I posted a chat I had several weeks back with Karen Melberg Schreer, and she's the author of one of the best novels I've read in a long time, Small Reckonings. Karen is based in Saskatoon, and I see her socially in terms of every book launch I go to. She's often there. She's a very nice person and an extremely gifted writer. It's a book that hasn't gotten attention beyond Saskatchewan and deserves to be read alongside Thomas Hardy and Margaret Atwood. So, it's brilliant. And then I put up my most anticipated Autumn 2025 releases video. Just yesterday, I believe. So that's there too. All right. I have a bail to tell you about. I finished 3 books, and I'm going to be starting a whole bunch. So let's get busy. The bail I have to tell you about is Dominion by Addie E. Citchens, which started out really promisingly, but I couldn't get beyond about 57% maybe, with an audio text combo. The writing, for the most part, is really good, and it's about this patriarchal Baptist family in Dominion, Mississippi. And Dominion is the title of the novel, and Dominion is a key aspect in terms of the incredibly, I would say, patriarchal, misogynist, and homophobic culture that this family perpetuates and certainly is mired in. The main strands of the narrative are the Reverend's wife. They call her the First Lady, and she has a terrible addiction to prescription pills, but she does not obtain by legal means. Her husband is a brilliant sermon giver, Reverend Saber Winfrey Jr., but a complete creep otherwise. And I don't know where that this son fits. They have about 5 boys, and their son, who is nicknamed Wonder, or Manny, his real name is Emmanuel, is, I think, football star in high school. He's a stud. He's got a beautiful voice. He's in the choir. And he has a girlfriend named Diamond, and she is one of the most appealing characters. She is the one appealing character in the book, in the sense that she's very lovable. She comes from a single mother, and her single mother abandoned her, and she's being raised by another woman. And she is just lovely and not well thought of in society because of her origins. She is this Studley son Wonder, or Emmanuel's girlfriend. So that all was working for me a lot, and then something violent happens that I felt the character work didn't support. And so all I'll say is that it was the character work for the son, Emmanuel, Manny, Wonder. His character was not fleshed out well enough, so that when this act of violence came, it just felt like genre fiction bullshit. It didn't make sense in any literary way. And then the farther I got past that point, the more I realized that the character work for that character only was just not there. So I lost complete interest in the story, and I abandoned it at the 60% mark. If weird stuff happens in the story that the character work does not support, and I do not mean that it has to be explainable or understandable, but it has to be somehow supported with really nuanced character work, or else I just throw a bit of a temper tantrum and move on. The 3 books that I did finish are all so wonderful that I have trouble ranking them in terms of which one I loved the most. They're certainly all 5-star reads, but I will start with the one that's kind of most problematically a 5-star read, and that's this collection of short stories by Elizabeth Jane Howard, Mr. Wrong. When I did my initial check-in, I said that I hated the first story, Mr. Wrong, that was kind of a quasi-ghost story, serial killer story, and that I loved the really short story, Summer Picnic. And I think there was one more story that I really hated within the first handful. Every other story until the last one, I loved with all my heart. I absolutely loved most of these stories. Which one do I want to tell you about? I'll tell you about the penultimate story. Toute direction. French title meaning all directions, and apparently that's a sign that you see on the road in France or in town to say, this is the only road out of town. In whatever direction you're going, this is the only way out. So that's the title of that story, and that is about a meek, a British girl, 20-something girl, and she stays with a friend of her mother's in her villa in France. I'm not sure why that section was there, but it didn't detract. I think it was just there to really show our young, kind of wallflower type young character, how meek she is. And then she goes from there to visit an old friend who's living in France, not far away. And she goes on the train over to see her, and then she arrives at this friend, her same age, childhood friend, who she hasn't seen for years, but they've kept up a lively correspondence. And this friend is she's a complete, what's a polite word for fuck up? I can't think of one right now. So she just completely, her life is in chaos. And it's told very humorously, which doesn't prepare you for the emotional depths that the story reaches, because I'll only tell you one more detail about the plot, is that this friend that she's come to visit is having an illegal abortion later that night. And apologizes for the bad timing, but it's now or never to have this abortion, and so she's hoping that her friend who's just arrived on the train to visit won't mind. And then they get back to her house, and her house is a mess, and there's no food in the fridge. It's hilarious, but then you realize, of course, it's also very serious, and then it goes off in a really profoundly moving direction at the very end of the story. It's probably one of the best stories I've read this year. Toute la direction. I didn't massacre the pronunciation. So there was 2 stories I really disliked, and one story I was a little bit ambivalent about. It was one that I read years ago as a standalone. It's a ghost story by Elizabeth Jane Howard, but rereading it now, I realize I'm some way to overcoming my allergy to ghost stories, so I didn't hate it, but I was a little bit indifferent. All the other ones were stellar, stunning, profoundly affecting works of short fiction, so 5 stars. Today I finished Emma by Jane Austen. This was for Jane in July. What are we now? October 2nd? I loved this. I didn't remember very much about it at all. I kind of remembered the nuances of Emma's character, but really not much about the story. So it was fun to read it again because I really didn't know how it was going to end up, and it is very mysterious in terms of what is going to be the final result. Emma is more than a bit of a meddler in other people's lives. She kind of plays matchmaker. She shouldn't trust her own intuition about who would be a good match for who and who actually likes who. And so there's a bit of comedy with that, but her comeuppance is actually quite poignantly revealed to herself and to the reader. But I still didn't know there was some secret relationship going on, but I couldn't remember. So all of that was a revelation to me because I didn't remember how it ended. I think for the first time, there was one section that actually brought me to tears, and that was where she's confronted about something that she says that's very unkind to a really low status character. And the way she reacted to that and the immediate aftermath of all that, I found it so moving, relatable, because I'm sure I've said mean things and then regretted them, and certainly had mean things said to me, whether or not the other person regretted it or not. And I realized how deeply invested I was in every gradation of the character work here. It makes me want to just pick up another Jane Austen novel immediately and read it, but I think I'll wait until next July. What a masterpiece of character-driven literature. I absolutely loved it so much. I'm already missing Emma. And I literally finished reading this to my mom like 20 minutes ago. So I think what I'm going to do is do a full review. I want to go through this page by page. I need to sit with this one before I say too much. I'll say a little bit now, but I think I'm going to do a full review. And this is the Saskatchewan Canadian novel published in 2010, Cool Water by Dianne Warren, set in a sleepy southern Saskatchewan fictional town called Juliet, with a cast of characters, all of whom seem completely normal and uninteresting, but none of which by the end are anything short of fascinating. I just really appreciated the kind of humorous, poignant way that those people and their stories threaded together very subtly. I often use the phrase, or certainly hear the phrase, deceptively humorous, and that certainly applies, but I want to kind of unpack that because there's something about the use of humor in here that just makes you think, oh, this is kind of a light, funny story. It kind of reminds me of a Corner Gas episode. If you're Canadian, you know what that is. But it's kind of a bewitching thing. Like, you're caught off guard with how deeply emotionally invested you get in the story. And it's got so many weird components, like a pet camel. And how, in a way, it's an insular community, but in other ways, it's the story and the people in it, like most people everywhere, that are not insular, that reach out to Bedouin nomadic life and the movies and things that go far beyond the place they live. And the way that the landscape, the natural landscape, arrests almost every one of these characters at certain places in the novel in a way that roots the story in its geographical setting really powerfully. So, I absolutely love this novel. All right, I think I'm starting 6 books. But I'm having such a good time, and I'm getting through the books, people. As long as I don't have any emotional upsets, I'll be just fine at this pace. So, let me talk about the 2 that I don't have physical copies of, because I'm most likely to forget those. One is, and I think I talked about this in my things I want to read by the end of the year, whatever that tag video is I did. I want to get back to Clarissa, the 1758 novel by Samuel Richardson that I've done 2/3 of. And I haven't picked it up to continue in 2 years, year and a half. And so I want to get back to it. I'm in the right space. I have most of the story still very much in my mind. It's one of my superpowers. I wish there was a way to market this superpower. But I am going to go back to the very beginning of Volume 3 of the audiobook. Each of the 3 volumes of the audiobook is 34 hours. I don't think I got more than about 10% of the way through it, and I don't really remember that stuff. So I'm going to pick back up there and continue to the end. And for the first time, I have purchased a hard copy of the Penguin edition, and it'll be arriving tomorrow. And so I'm going to do that as an audio text combo. I'm very excited about that. The other one that I'm going to be starting, I have it electronically, The Ark, is the second novel by the queer Scottish novelist Allan Radcliffe, called Blurred Faces. It releases in early November, so I'm planning to read it in time to interview Allan and have that interview published on my channel on the pub date. I read Allan's debut, a short novel called The Old Haunts. I've actually finished it in early 2025 and absolutely loved it. I have an interview with him about it. I'll link all that in the show notes. One of the best books I've read this year. This one, the opening premise is 2 men meet on a dating app. It's supposed to be a casual encounter, but something more develops. Well, that's the story of Kenji's and my first meeting, so can't wait to dive into that one as well. For my Patreon book club, if you're interested in supporting me on Patreon, and do so immediately, you can take part in the next book club meeting. At the end of October, we're discussing this Palestinian short novel, Gaza Weddings by Ibrahim Nasrallah, translated from the Arabic by Nancy Roberts. The protagonists are twin sisters who live in the besieged Gaza Strip. Looking forward to getting into this and discussing it with my Patreon members. I shall not be bailing on this one, people. Victober is here. I'm very excited that I have cleared enough of a space to participate, at least by reading one book. And it's the book that I started for Victober the last time I made an attempt to participate and had to withdraw because I was overwhelmed. That's what often happens with Victober is by the time I get to October, my current reads is so swollen I just can't do anything. But I'm doing something this year, and I'm getting back to a novel I just got a very bare start on 2 years ago, something like that. Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell. Elizabeth Gaskell is one of my favorite writers of the period, and I have not read Mary Barton. I have the audiobook all queued up, and looking forward to diving into that one too. Now that I have bailed on my audiobook selection, I'm replacing it with one that I'm going to be listening to on Everand. I didn't know it existed in audio, and I previewed it. It's lovely, but I've had this novel for a while and I've been dying to read it, so now I'm going to do it as an audio text combo. A queer novel from Wales, Above Us the Sea, by Ania. It's a debut novel. The premise is straight woman walks into a gay bar in Cardiff and meets a gay couple that becomes an ambiguous love triangle. So, chunky one too. And finally, now that I finished reading that wonderful novel, Cool Water, to Mum, I gave her a stack of books that I thought some of which would appeal to her, and she chose them. And this is one of the ones she said, definitely let's do this. So we're going to be doing this one next, and it is a Irish novel from back in the day, Full House by M.J. Farrell, which was the pen name that Molly Keane used in her early writing days. She said it sounds funny and interesting. She read the first few pages, and I have not read anything by M.J. Farrell / Molly Keane, but have at least one other in my library, and I know she wrote a whole bunch. So looking forward to starting that. This is one of the ones I won in a draw on the wonderful Nora's Instagram for, I think, Spinster September or something last year, the year before. She's becoming a really good friend, and not only because I won 2 books, and she sent them to me in the mail from Ireland, and this is one of them. All right, well, boy, I'm going to have an interesting reading week next week. That's all I got. Thanks for watching.